That's Ram from Steve Howe at WMMR. Earlier this week, we taped this conversation, and it starts with Steve just sort of picking around on this guitar banjo. First, Steve Howe.
In London, a guitar player used to tell me that every time I saw him, until unfortunately he died. Crying? But he was a really crazy guy. He used to work in a shop, and I used to take my guitar and say, tune the bridge for me, or straighten the neck for me. Sell this. He says, I sell it, and then get a banjo coming back in.
This is a Gibson steel banjo.
It's a banjo guitar.
Oh, it's a banjo guitar?
Yeah.
What's... It's
just tuned like a guitar, so it's got a bone. Actually, this one sounds less like a banjo than the other one I had. It sounds more like a guitar.
Do you do any old, any reels on it, or any old...
Well, since it's not actually tuned like a banjo, there's certain sort of reservations it sort of has. I mean, there's in a film that I did the beginnings, you see me play banjo in it a bit, because we do this thing. I hope you can see it soon in Philadelphia. When Yes Songs comes to Philadelphia.
Yes, there'll be a...
Beginnings is on with it. Film. 12-minute film I made. So... And I do the track Ram, the kind of goes... That was a guitar banjo, so on that track.
Have you used that in some of the Yes recordings?
Not yet, no. No, I've only had a guitar banjo for about... I've had banjos for about a year, I think. I've got two lovely English banjos at home that I had repaired. And then I got a guitar banjo last American tour, I think.
I've seen pictures of you sitting surrounded by your guitar collection. How many is it now?
I've got, I think, about 65, really, they're all really good guitars, every one of them. It's a bit frightening, actually, because there's no sort of Mickey Mouse jobs, They're all sort of genuine, they fit into a collection of sort of, a selection, really, of guitars.
The big question is, how about the guitar synthesizer? You're so identified with it.
It's back here again. It got damaged by British Airways, unfortunately. I mean, any airline would have had trouble shipping it, but it was in a whole lot of boxes, and I don't think it was quite ready for it anyway. So, not such a slag off on British Airways, but it's a mixture of that and the fact that the machine wasn't really built quite enough for that. So they're rectifying all this at the moment, and by the end of February I'm supposed to have a new... I had the prototype over in England, and now they've got models ready. So I'll be better off with a model.
What did you do with it when you had it? Did you do anything?
Yeah, it was sitting up at home. I did some tapes on it, and I used it on a demo that I did of a song that we might be playing with Yes. And so I kind of got prepared, and I found out a few of the things it was doing, but then it kept going kind of up the chute, But this was some inherent problems that I think are worth ironing out, because it's just very good when it's going.
It was surprising to see that you didn't use it on the album.
Right.
Everybody said, did he? When I first played it, they said, did he use it? Where is it?
No, I didn't use it anywhere. All the things I wanted to do with it, I sort of did simply on a mini Moog. So I was a bit disappointed at the time, but the synthesizer had come over and plugged it in, and it hadn't worked. So he said, "Oh shit, this is terrible. Is it going to be all right? Blah blah blah. Working this way." And then we had long distance calls while they engineered and overhauled it, and then the guy actually came over, but it was all too late, because after that tour last time we saw you, I went straight back, and I spent, 2 months more on my record or something.
I remember when you came up to the station, you forgot the tape. You grabbed your average white band tape, but you had played me I think right.
Yeah.
When here in New York, he had played me a little bit of it,
Yeah.
and I guess it was different.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember that one listening, but I mean,
Right.
it ended up different on the album, you know.
Yeah, I suppose from there on it did really. I think what I played you was just a rough mix of the basic idea.
I should ask you your favorite tracks before I tell you mine. What on the album now? I mean, it's a couple of months later. Well, what do you think of the album now? It's been out for a couple of months. This is unusual, I guess, that we're talking about. It's the first time I've seen you, since the album came out. We're talking about something that's already a couple of months old.
I'm sort of, it's sort of passed on from me a lot. I feel very happy at it, and I still play at home occasionally. And I sort of, I got a lot of fun out of seeing what it would do. Since I made this promotion film, Beginnings, I worked with the same people who did Yes songs. So we formed a sort of partnership, not a documented one. I mean, more of a sort of spiritual one. We really get along, and so Beginnings was, it's amused quite a few people, and it's been shown in a lot of places around the world, and we've done deals for it to link up with Yes songs, and that to me was, I got very into Break Away From It All at that time. I found it was a song that I wrote ages and ages ago,
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. When I lived
I was going to say, but that is my favorite song.
Before Dylan was born, I wrote that song. In fact, that's over 6 years ago. I wrote everything. The tune. I didn't, obviously. The guitar solo is more potential. The arrangement was,
You know what fascinates me about Breakaway From? I love the song. I think it's my favorite song on the album. That and Lost Symphony, I was going to say. And also, Beginnings is a whole other thing. I love that for what it is. But I think that the essence, what I perceive of your music is Break Away From It All and Lost Symphony.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But the what I call the plunking effect.
Yeah.
On Break Away From It All is amazing. How did you do that?
What is
at the beginning? Right at the beginning, there's a that
yeah.
where there's a I can't even hear what it is. I mean, it's like a weird effect. It's like
do you mean what's playing that lick? Dun, dun, dun,
yeah,
dun,
it's
dun,
right.
That was done on the sitar guitars. Two sitar guitars. A very sort of banjo plunk.
Right. But no special technical. No special tape effects.
There were two things going on. That was going on.
Right.
The bass and the guitar. There was a guitar going.
Right.
Those two things going on at the same time. And Bill's percussion. He had his percussion tracks, and they all sort of joined up there.
93.3 WMMR.
The skill sort of led into it, so it must be the sitar that you like.
Fascinating. I love it, and I like the tune. And Lost Symphony is great. It's great also. And Beginnings is like, it's the kind of thing if you play it, people want to know who it is because if they don't know, they would have no way of knowing who the artist is on the record, because it sounds like a classical piece. It's beautiful. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Good.
What were the sources on that?
Well, that really was, although Patrick played a great role in it, it was a funny it was a unique sort of conception that I had, because I had 4 ideas. One of them was to repeat one idea anyway, but the 2 main tunes in it came about when I played keyboards, and I was doing some overdubbing at home where I did a melody, improvised melody on a Moog. I mean, all writers do this, and then you get another sound, an opposite sound. If that's high, you get a low sound, and you write another part, you play another part. So, in fact, what I had was, I had one part going, but then when I put it together with the other part, it was, it was like that, you see. So But then when I came to play it on the guitar, I was just amazed because, you know, I've written it with a keyboard and yet it was just perfect on the guitar. The same thing happened with... All that I did on the same idea. I improvised on a Moog and then added another Moog, or two, doing the sort of the harmonising of it. And then the cadenza I'd had for, you know, was a piece. I was searching for another piece to go with, and the whole thing knitted together. So I played these pieces to Patrick, and explained to him how I saw it. That I saw this being played 2 or 3 times first in the guitar cadenza, and then how I did it on tape with 7 of the main melodies building up at the end to quite a crescendo, you know, where I got Patrick to take over, you know, on his Moog, and then go back to a cadenza, back to the last verse, but have the main instruments joining up at the end, which were in the end the electric guitar and Moog were playing, you know, in harmony, and then he scored it, you know, and started working on it, and then wrote out bits and pieces, and after talking about 2 or 3 times with him, he then after about a week, he suddenly came back, and there were masses of dots on the paper, you know. I said, yeah, I've done it, you know, like, I've got this doing this, and I got this doing. And then the day we actually recorded it, I mean, we just had the studio booked that day, I had it booked for weeks. And then it was beginnings day, right, we were going to do that, and the orchestra came in, and they all started to play it, and I thought, wow, Patrick, you did it, because there he was on the harpsichord, you know, which there wasn't, maybe, harpsichord, I was very worried about having too much harpsichord on the record, because unless it's a harpsichord piece, you know, the harpsichord in the context of an orchestra, you know, plays very backdropish, you know, which wasn't exactly what I wanted, but when I came to mix, I was sort of, it was a bit of a sore thumb. It was rather like castanets. They really, in the studio, they really sort of hear them, and you've got to place them very... So he did this marvellous thing, and conducted the orchestra for the second movement.
Then how much of it was, the orchestra part was done live, right?
Oh yeah, and really everything was done. Well, except all the electric things, you know, which...
they were done first, or...? First?
No. Well, we laid down the track, and which was Spanish guitar and harpsichord. I didn't play at all in the second movement when we recorded it, which was the... You know, I just played a few of those things like that, because I didn't know what I was going to play there yet, and Patrick didn't play either, so we had a suspended orchestra for the second movement. And then the only part we knew we were going to add definitely was what we called the love melody, which was... And that was the bit I was going to play on the guitar and he was going to play on the piano, which we did. And we decided to take the whole orchestra out, you know, and we just left the piano and the steel guitar to play. And then we brought the orchestra back in. And I kept saying back to play some Moog on it. I wanted to. He said, no, well, I don't know, I like it as it is, you know. I said, no, you play Moog. And then eventually saw it. And, you know, he sort of said, what do you want me to play here? I said, no, here, you know. We were exchanging the idea of being able to conduct each other, because he'd sort of conducted a lot in beginnings as far as writing it out. And then I sort of encouraged him to play on it.
WMMR, Ed Sciaky here, back to more with Steve Howe. Yes? You worked a lot with Patrick on the record.
Right. Yeah.
What are your feelings of now having not worked with John on this record, and also with Bill again?
Yeah.
Working with Bill.
Well, with John, he was involved in the record before I started work on it. And it was an important time when, it was deciding really what tracks to do. That seemed to be the first, what do you call the first hurdle? You know, the first sort of thing you got across is what actual tracks do you want? Because I had a lot of choice, I had a lot of songs, I was glad to say, and a lot of songs from the era that break away from it all comes, which I think was a very strong writing era for me.
Where would that fit in chronologically with Yes?
Or pre-Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh.
6 years ago. It was when I was just sitting in a garden in Watford, I think it was, somewhere in London. The only time I ever lived anywhere outside of London was this period, which was for a little while in 1968. But I'd been writing for a couple of years, and at that time I had quite a surge on about writing songs, really, I think about my youth, really. It was a sort of I don't know, I was in touch with it. It was before I had any children. It was before I could conceive of actually going on much longer. You know, at that time I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I mean, I just didn't have any... although I knew I wanted sort of to be a very accepted musician, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know anything. I felt completely, just sort of completely out of it, you know. I mean, I was just doing it because I was doing it. I didn't have any concepts at all about... I mean, it's always hard to try and reach the point of talking about a period that you're unaware of your own potential, ignoring one's own potential. It's a very good time because one's thoughts are not aren't restricted by any way, but there's no impression on you. Without impression, it's also a naive sort of time, I imagine. And I think it was a very good time for me when I think it was really the first batch of songs. You know, songs come in batches, and John always says the same thing. You know, you get a period when you write, and a period when you arrange and think about and chew over and finish verses. And this was the first time I wrote lots of songs I know I'm going to be singing very soon, you know, which are sort of from the era of, let's say, Break Away From It All.
So it's really interesting because people would presume that you come out with a solo album after all these years with Yes, that this is your latest, you know, this is what you've just created, you know, and here are the things.
It is.
Well,
Right.
But some of the ideas were there, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it takes at least 2 years to write a song anyway. I mean, the most frightening thing I did was Australia.
That's funny, Elton writes them in 10 minutes.
Oh, no. I can't write songs like that. No, it really does take me a good few years before I'm actually... you know, sort of really on top of the song. I took a few chances in the beginnings because I hadn't... Australia, I started writing when I was in Australia, which was about 2 years ago, and I'd only just finished that song. I mean, I only just sort of... I had to rush, actually, to sort of say to myself, if I want Australia, I've got to do it now, you know. And the arrangement was a really exciting one, all that things. And... you know, it was the only track, one of the only tracks on the album that I did without ever having done a demo. You know, I usually do a demo at home where I play everything and sort of get some idea of where the song was going. And it's funny hearing those now. I mean, I've got one of the Pleasure Stole the Night that's really sort of unusual.
How about Bruford? How about working with Bill again? Yeah.
That was a great idea. It seemed to me that out of the drummers that were around, you know, Bill was somebody who I had a lot of fun playing with, and it stuck with me, you know. And there were things that you could say I missed about Bill, you know. And it's quite healthy to miss, you know, somebody, because if you want to go back, you know. And I can't really say Bill's certainly hasn't let me know to any extent at all whether he sort of whether he liked what I did with Break Away From It All, you know, because he'd played on it and it was just drums. Right, and just one guitar playing a sort of electric rhythm, and that's how we did quite a few tracks.
Did you tell him what to play? I mean, I guess you can't tell him exactly
what. No, certainly not. We listened to the demo, you see, that I'd done, which was a bit faster than the record, and gave you a pretty good idea because it had a drum machine on it, which kept up the same sort of tempo all the time. That was very, quite Latin American, really. I think Bill latched onto it. But when we started rehearsing it, it changed a lot. And in certain places, I was very glad that Bill forced me into making decisions even at that stage, because I almost felt like, as long as I knew what the arrangement was, I could convey that to somebody. But Bill also helped me to make certain decisions about what I was playing. Well, it was very an inventive time. With Alan, it was very sort of spacey and sort of, we had the track under our hands, and we were just waiting for the good take. We were more rehearsed. But with Bill just sort of came in and I said, this is the number. I sung it to him 3 or 4 times. he started playing, we started loosening up, getting a drum sound. It was a whole much sort of more unusual because we weren't used to working with each other for some time. But, you know, when occasionally when I played the record, I thought Break Away From It All was the best track. Mainly, the main reason, not any real preference for the song at all, but for the energy that was sort of excelled on it, if you like. I'd like all records to have that amount of energy, and maybe that's what I'm after on my next album, is just to step up the energy a bit more, because I feel I can, you know, sort of pursue this sort of idea, and I'm out for a lot of energy on the record, so, you know, I don't foresee me getting into a quieter vein. I feel like getting into a slightly heavier, sort of, a stronger vein, where I can let loose very basic things, very sort of, you know, tense, a few more tense things. There's a few songs I want to get out that aren't really about being, like Doors of Sleep was like a song that came together out of contentment, if you like, you know, for enjoying things. And possibly Break Away From It All era's songs were not like that at all. So already I could explain, well, I shouldn't really, but one could explain a slight pattern in one's writing anyway, due to just changes, you know, and good changes, most of them. But certainly different ways of looking at your music you can only do when you've made a record. And I think I learned so much out of beginnings, so many things that I didn't learn that I thought I would, rather, out of Yes. But I think part of it was a vocal harmony feeling that I wanted. And partly was, in some ways, I enjoy having, obviously, the last say on everything I do. But doing beginnings, I've learned a great deal that I, besides having a fair amount of assistance from general people standing around, you know, nobody was around me that wasn't prepared to say what they think, because otherwise they weren't any use, you know. I mean, it's no good having anybody working for you who doesn't say what they think, you know. So I was getting a fair amount of sort of crosstalk, you know, from people. But it was certainly a good fun, you know. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of problems, but they weren't the music. You know, the music was ticking over and it was building up.
93.3 WMMR.
Is there a Yes album in the works?
Cooking. It's sort of rehearsing at the moment. Very exciting.
Yeah?
We're doing, we know when we saw you once and we hummed some songs, you know, we did some crazy stuff.
Right.
I can't remember quite what we did.
We did,
You want to do that again?
Is it developed any further now?
That one's developed quite a bit. We're getting that one down. And we've gone into some new songs as well, or new to the group. we're doing a song of Chris's that he had a demo done. We're doing a song of mine that I had a demo done that we're arranging. And this sort of arrangement's really good because we're taking one song and just arranging it, you know. Need I say, although we think of extensions in our music all the time, a couple of songs are going in a sort of very direct sort of basis, which is good as well. And then there's the songs that we talked about last time together, High Vibration song, and another song that we did a lot of arranging on, which Alan and John wrote. And so it's possible that there'll be a sort of a happy sort of mixture of sort of direct songs and a slightly more in-depth view of the music as well, which I think is good because we don't have to go any direction. We feel very sort of like, well, I tell you a secret sort of thing that's been happening, and that is that we've been jamming like crazy, which is very unusual. I mean, it's the first in Yes history. It's a totally new barrier broken, and it's exceptionally good because when people always ask us about improvisation, we used to say, sure, you know, we improvise, we do this and we do that, you know. But although there was the occasional sort of crazy jam going on, we never sort of took it to the extent that we were having a jam actually to get somewhere. I mean, besides sort of letting out some emotions on tour, like having a good bash on the drums, we started doing jams every day, and we got masses of tapes, huge, extravagant jams, and sometimes they get incredibly tight and we go off in certain directions and stomp and freak out, and there's a few unrepeatable moments, but also there's a lot of very good ideas that got from it that is very genuine new Yes music. And sort of what's different about it is that we sort of composed it together. I'm not saying that's totally new because so many arrangements sort of born out of that situation, but we never used to do it as a separate entity. We never used to do it to get our music, you know. Sure, we do it as a sort of, I was thinking of the word, well, a sort of direction to go in, to get certain music together, we'll do this now. But to do it for the sake of itself is something else. So I think that's, you know, it's sort of bring out the flags, we felt a bit. I know Alan did a lot because we have to talk about some music that we played for quite a long time, and we might be saying, you're going to do this, and we're going to work out how you're going to do this, how many beats is this, and we might spend the whole day talking about 11 bars. You know, we had one of these the other day, it was just incredible, went on for about 3 days later, suddenly, someone banged on the floor and said, no, it's in 9/5, sorry, it's in 9/5, you know, and this had to be sort of, you know, pumped into everybody, and we could start work again, you know, and so we're experiencing the sort of extremes a little more, where we're like tearing away into some notes.
The last time you were out on the road was really Patrick's first, he hadn't really played much on relay, as I recall, and it was like he was really breaking in on the road, wasn't he? More so than...
Yeah, I mean, I think he did an awful lot on relay, but I don't...
Oh, I thought he hadn't played that much on relay.
Really?
Well, you were there. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
As I recall, it seemed to me that you said he just joined, you know, and just.
Well, actually, he's worded it like that. Quite a few times in each other's company, indeed. So the only way I'd say is that when it came to it, possibly what happened was that Soon was a sort of was anybody's, you know. John had this idea about Soon. You know, and we talked about what instrument, and it seemed such a great tune, we were going to do it on keyboards. In fact, John did a demo that was totally like on keyboard. And I was sort of watching this melody, and really, Patrick could have done it on keyboards, you know. And somehow, the tune hadn't been taken yet, you know, and like, because nobody put a stamp on it, you know. And then just one day I just sort of went, ding, 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 ding. That was it. And this is everybody looked around and sort of, sounds nice. And then I could feel, then I sensed that, well, it's possibly right that because it was that sort of delicate tune, anybody could take it. But I took it because I had the roots to take it from. You know, I could sense how it could be. For Yes, it was a big step there to see how soon, you know, because if Patrick would play it, and he played it a lot, but like everybody, you know, wasn't that convinced about it. It wasn't any flaw on him. It's just that what you said is then correct, but he hadn't been in the group quite long enough. I think you brought that.
He seemed
out.
to be in awe of the whole thing. The first time I met him, he was like, he couldn't believe it. He was saying, like, I can't believe I'm actually in this band, because he really, he wanted to be in Yes for so long. Next is Patrick and Alan's.
It's definitely Alan.
And John's will be last person. How's his coming?
He's virtually finished it. I think he's more or less finished it now. He
And what's his like?
It is very good.
Is it like what we heard? He played a little of it.
Yeah.
Changed.
I didn't think it was actually going to be much like that, but he did get very into, well, totally playing everything, all the instruments, and very involved with the keyboard, and very sort of sensitive about the other instruments. Used them sparingly, really. So he has got a rich texture of music, and what I sort of admire him for in many ways is that he did go out the context of the group completely. And Crooks and mine albums were more based in a group context of projecting the songs, and his is in more of is more mystique in some ways. But we all had to do different records, and that's the joy of it, because Patrick's is something else again, and Alan's is.
Did you work it all on any of the others?
The only other one I played on is on Alan's.
Oh.
I play on one track, the same track John sings on, which is called Song of Innocence, and that was, I mean, I would have loved to have played on more, actually, but because I didn't have any reservations about asking Alan at any time, he could have asked me. That was the extent of the sort of cross, talk thing. But every time I went to John's, I always took a guitar in case he said to me, do something, because I would have loved to. But I'll play on any of the records, So.
Play on my record?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let you know when I'm gonna.
Okay.
Do you want to pick a couple of notes of some of the new Yes tunes for us as a little preview?
Well, this is something that's not on the album. It was part of an idea we were going to use in the song, but I don't know whether we're going to do it. But it was what came to me at the time. We're doing, as I say, we're doing quite a few jumpy things. We got some nice sort of cross ideas going. But I shouldn't give any away.
Okay. Well, thanks, Steve. We'll look forward to seeing you. I mean, people are going to be so frustrated that you're talking, but you're not here playing.
Right.
That nobody can see us play right now. But
come
the summer,
Right. Well, when Yes Songs comes, I hope everybody goes to see it.
Oh, the movie, right?
Because it's although it's a 72 concert,
right?
It's still a bit of a laugh, There's a few funnies on it.
It's great that that period of time of Yes is preserved.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Rick.
Right.
People.
Well,
it's interesting.
Well, since, as I said, the film thing is growing with us. We have got quite a stockpile now of Yes films. We've got QPR and we've got The Rainbow, which is Yes songs, and a few other things. Since everybody's doing a promotion film with their album, we got a lot of choice eventually of continuing. And one of the most exciting things we've been talking about is something we haven't mentioned at all, and that's that we're doing this sort of world tour business. Well, what we're doing this year, we're going to be filming and doing a very special film, feature film, big budget, Panavision sort of, we're not actually doing it ourselves, but we're involved very closely in it, and we'll be sort of utilising a lot of different ideas in portraying our music. It's not just going to be, Yes Songs is just a concept, you know. This is going to be a part concert, sort of part documentary, but a sort of, well, we hope it's going to be a sort of insight into what we're doing it for. And maybe, you know, you'll be you and me talking like, this is it, but it's an opening. It's a very exciting sort of opening, because there's a lot of things we can do to sort of, I know there's some things I want to do as well, and we all have bent up ideas, you know, that need to come out, and some of them are very visual. So with the new album, we hope to have a film later in the year, or late at the year, to sort of top it off in a sort of descriptive story, partly about how the album was constructed, rehearsals, you know, like for the tour, and you see us moving equipment around and things. A bit of a crazy loon, but as well as a like useful, like
really. But people have no idea. People have no idea how it all happens, you know.
Right. Well, they're going to find out, because they're part of what makes it happen, you know. And the other side is quite interesting, and also it's something that can put the cards right about us, you know, finding out. Not that we don't want to be movie stars in the context of, well, you know, great man, here I am, what do I do? What we do is you know, it's a sort of ritual. It has its ritual sort of sides. And I think it'd be good to have a film. Everywhere we go now, we're constantly saying, you know, we should have had a film for that, because just little bits of things that happen are really sort of worth keeping, you know. But what are we going to do with it all? The world is collecting all these sort of dossiers of people. What's it all for?
Right.
Right.
All right. Steve Howe, WMMR Philadelphia. We'll be back in just a moment with a bit of chat with Chris Squire, and we'll start with a bit of his album, and then they come back together a little bit at the very end. WMMR Philadelphia, FM 93.3. Okay, and now next auditioner is Chris Squire. You've always been called Fish, so I guess you called your album Fish Out of Water.
Yeah.
But the double meaning is obvious.
Yeah. Well,
Did you feel like a fish out of water? I mean, making the album. I mean,
no, I didn't really. I kind of put the title forward as a teaser in a way for people who were going to review the album, so that they could really use that phrase if they wanted to slag it off.
Right.
But fortunately, they liked it, so you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's nice, you know the fish bit.
Yeah.
And
how did you get
Topographic Oceans, right?
Yeah. Well, how did you get the name Fish?
It was in fact Bill invented it. Bill Griffin. Are you close enough there? Go on.
Bill
Yeah. Yeah, he just used to call me that as a nickname, because I used to spend a long time in the bathroom when we used to share hotel suites on the road. I like spending a long time in the bathroom because I do a lot of thinking in there, you see. Having a bath and
there's an expression, he drinks like a fish.
yeah.
That has nothing to do with it, right?
No. No.
You know, the album is doing great. This week it's like, I think, 35 with a bullet somewhere. It's like
Yeah, I hear it's doing very well.
Doing very well. And that must make you feel good.
It feels me good that it's got that far. You know, I didn't know what to expect because none of Yes have, apart from Rick, of course, have ever done solos before, and you know, it was good to see. You know, that great reaction on Steve's album first, of course. You know,
you know, yours is getting a lot of attention. I think, you know, there's probably a lot of surprise involved. You know, you're you know, being the bass man. I mean, traditionally bass players sort of have stayed in the background in bands, and I know you don't. I mean, one of the main things about Yes is that you've always been right up front. The bass has been a real important part of the thing. surprising. I mean, I think a lot of people are surprised that the bass player. I mean, there are people who probably are not familiar with your position in Yes, in terms of what really it has to do with Yes and so on. To a lot of casual music listeners, you're the bass player from Yes.
Yeah.
And here you come out with this album that is really making a lot of gains to people. I think a lot of people who haven't really gotten into Yes are getting into your record. I mean, and I was thinking, in fact, I observed.
Yeah, no, go on.
That instead of your solo albums being curiosities for Yes freaks, they could turn out to be introductions to the group's music for people who haven't been into the group.
Yeah, I would say that by the time all the solos have been around, that it will have broadened the audience of the group. I think that different albums will appeal to different members of the public who maybe aren't into Yes, and will bring, this is the kind of plan behind it in a way, that it will bring more audience into Yes, from appreciating what we do individually. I also think, that you mentioned, well, I'm just a bass player, and maybe it's more the era of the bass player now, is it? Times, I mean, you look
but
at...
you know what I mean? I'm not to cast aspersions on the bass players as a class, but you know what I mean? That
Sure, I understand that.
And not to devalue your importance in the band.
No, I wasn't saying that. What I was saying was that more, like acoustic guitar players have always made albums, right? When they sung, and that's obviously, but not, as you say before, most bass players have made an album. So it's usually been some introspective, slightly jazz feel album or something that is a collector's piece or something like that. But there's people are making, different musicians, drummers as well, are making albums.
I wonder how many people think about the fact that Paul McCartney was just the bass player.
That's right. Well, I mean, that's the same thing in a way.
It's sort of like that.
He was a great bass player as well, actually.
Oh, that's coming from you. That's a compliment. Yeah. Why did you? It is true. It's not my imagination that bass was sort of like as a neglected part of bands for a while. I mean, in terms of recognition, do you think? I mean, sort of like the underdog.
Yeah.
You've done a lot to turn that around. I mean, how did you find yourself being a bass player? Did you? In the first place?
Well, because of my size, I think could have had something to do with it. Because I've got big hands, which is ideal.
Did you start on guitar, regular guitar?
No, I didn't. I just started with bass. Yeah, because it felt like the right instrument for me. There's not very much more to it attached to it than that. I just decided I was going to play bass.
How old were you then?
16, which is quite old, really. Quite old to learn to play an instrument, because I hadn't played any instrument before then, although I've been pretty well versed in music from a young child. I hadn't played anything till I was 16.
And from then it was right into Sin, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the band Sin.
Sin, exactly.
Yes.
And after the preliminary local groups, it was into Sin, and that lasted for 2.5 years maybe, touring around England. And then it wasn't obviously destined to continue, even though it was a good group with a lot of fresh ideas and a lot of very musical ideas as well. But maybe it was a little premature, I think. And so anyway, we finished, and after a year or so, I met John, and we started Yes in '68.
And you wrote Sweetness, etc., etc. Yes, yeah. John has told me the story. We've all talked about that. The album is so beautiful. I mean, people. I've heard the word Beatlesque applied to it. I mean, did you consciously have Beatle ideas in the back of your mind? I mean, what did you think when you set out to make the record?
On my album?
On your album, yes.
Well, I mean, to be Beatlesque, I think, is a compliment, because it's not. I know what that means in a way. if one can get anywhere near capturing the kind of magic the Beatles had on their records, then you're achieving something.
Yeah.
But I never consciously thought about their music. I just thought clearly about what I was doing. And I've heard a lot since the Beatles as well. And I've just put the ideas into vinyl, if you like, of my own. Yeah.
How do you see? I mean, what do you think the differences are? Are there differences between your quote your music and what you do with Yes? I mean, what are there?
It's hard for me to answer, actually. I mean, that's more for someone who can be much more objective to answer that. All I can say is that I worked exactly the same way as I do when we work with Yes, except it was only me. You know, I mean, in terms of my input into the music, I thought and worked on it the same way as I would as if I was making a Yes album with the others. But of course, when you're doing it with the others, there's a lot more help around.
The others weren't around at all? I mean, did they?
No.
No?
Well, Steve was busy doing his, and so we hardly met at all. And it was during last year when we were touring a lot anyway, and I was fitting the recording in between the tours and things. So the others weren't really around because we were working as a band at the time as well. And we were resting in between, and I was working.
Steve wrote told me that some of his songs were very old songs. They were from an earlier period. I mean, were your songs new or old or on his own?
All the songs on my album were written in the period about a year previous. Around during 1974, really, the songs were written for that album.
Were they written specifically for? Did you have it in mind to do them for your solo album, or were they possible Yes songs?
No, yeah, I was just writing songs, and I was taping them roughly on cassette, you know, in a very rough form. And I realised after a period of time that I had, you know, a lot of songs, and that it was worthwhile me approaching the idea of making a solo album, because I knew that there were too many songs for yesteryears anyway. And apart from that, I hadn't really been writing songs around 72, 73, because for a period of time then I'd got more into learning about the bass that I was playing, and I studied the whole kind of way that I was playing at that time. And during that period I didn't think much about actually writing. I didn't write very much, because I wrote, as you know, earlier with John in the first three years.
Do you write on an instrument? Do you write? How do you?
I think my favourite instrument for writing, for me, has turned out to be piano. It seems to be the instrument I can develop most basic ideas upon, because you have the freedom of chords, you know. I do write some things on bass, but, you know, with a piano you can get more of an idea of chords and when you're playing. And acoustic guitar as well, some things. But most of the tracks on my album, I think, were piano orientated, the original writing. In fact, they all were, apart from little bits here and there which were guitar. Safe was a guitar song, but Lucky 7 and Hold Out Your Hand, Silently Falling, and You By My Side were all piano songs originally.
The fact that there are any short tracks is a surprise to some people, you know, that because Yes has sort of been known now for longer pieces, you know.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is the next Yes album, Steve and I were talking about the next Yes album, there will be some shorter pieces.
I believe so. I think the next Yes album is going to contain, not very short, I don't think we can think in terms of 3-minute pieces of music, but I think we do get on quite well with pieces of music that last between 6 or 10 minutes. You know, we can work in a 6-minute kind of thing, or a 10-minute, or a 20-minute, or a 40, or
80. Talking about broadening Yes's appeal, I've been with Yes since the beginning, and I've seen it progress. But what do you say to people who, or how do you feel about the people who have not been and who come along? Say, maybe some people just came in on topographic, maybe some came in on relayer, and they've gone back a little bit. But it's always harder to look back, and especially with a band like this, it really has changed so much since the first album. It's incredible. The progression is obvious, but to go back and look at it, it's difficult.
Obviously, it's harder for people to get into Yes's broader ideas. Well, the ones where we've worked on, the larger pieces of music. Obviously, that's more difficult for anyone. I mean, I know it's not. I can't just listen to a record that's got a 20-minute piece of music on one side, be it a rock record or classical record, and immediately take it in, because that length of music has interrelating sections going through it, and the mind isn't capable of taking that in always first time. Whereas, of course, a 3-minute piece of music, you can evaluate it as soon as you've heard it, in a way. But
do you feel you have to make records for the people who are just coming along now new, or you just make them and whatever they
now, you mean? Yeah. No, I don't think so. All one can honestly do as a musician is honestly try and do the best you can, and depending on the bouncing off of how you're feeling at the time. I think that's what it is, you know. It's a purely something that has to come from the heart, you know, and it has to happen as it happens.
And you don't make conscious efforts to make it more accessible or more commercial?
No, and not conscious efforts, but of course one takes notice of what people say, and I've just said it myself, that to get into long pieces of music is more difficult, and I think that all the Yes fans who've bothered to do it have been really good to us for doing that.
I remember when Topographic came out, you got slammed in the Melody Maker and other places, you know, for that album. And I see that changing now. I see that, I mean, on that particular record, I think people think much better of Topographic now than when it first came out. You know,
obviously it took time. And as I said, you know, it does take time to get into long tracks. And it took us a long time to make, and therefore it's going to take a bit of listening to. But as I said before, the more you put into listening to something that's a little more hard to take, then the more you will get out of it eventually.
Yeah, I found that's true, and that's the answer to people who say, "Oh, I can't get into them. They just, you know, too complex."
But that doesn't mean that we're just only going to do 20-minute pieces, because we're not. We can't. I mean, in fact, on Steve's album, he does fairly short tracks. You know, I don't know how long.
So the tracks are as long as they are. Whatever it takes to do the music is what it is.
That's really what is important. Yeah, the music should be as long as it has to be, and not too long, and not too short.
Right.
And we're not perfect.
No.
No.
Was it a coincidence that you're all doing solo albums right now?
Not really. We decided that we would all use this particular time to do them, and it seems to have worked fairly successfully.
It is unusual. I can't think of another band where everybody does an album.
Can you think of another band where everybody is capable of doing it?
No, I didn't want to say that. That's true. Is there any rivalry between the five of you over your albums? I mean, how do you...
Well, I've looked at it this way. I hope that the success of my album and the success that Steve has already had with his album will help the others to have more success than we've had. You know, that's the way I look at it. I just hope that the whole process of Yes albums being on the market will just help to inspire people to get into what is happening.
Yeah. Yes is still your main interest, do you think?
I don't see myself performing on the road outside of that context, really. Mainly because of the headaches I know it can cause for one person to bear that responsibility. And secondly, because if I was going to go and play with other people, it would take a long time to find musicians as good as the other guys in Yes. Yeah. And what would be the point of going and playing with anyone who wasn't as good? You know, that's the way I look at it, really.
and Steve Howe. They rejoined us. They rejoined each other and me together, and here they are. As far as the stature of Yes now, I mean, John always says we're never there. He says something like that. It's like, you know, you want to reach something, but you never really reach it. I mean, do you think Yes has reached something, or do you think it's about to reach something bigger?
As I said before, I hope, you know, I think Yes would like to, you know, expand their audience as any performing artist would like.
In terms of the music, in terms of
music as well. Well, that's something else. You know, no, you're not really ever there, I don't think. There'll always be something that you want to achieve in music that you haven't achieved yet, I believe.
And commercially, I mean, it's all these years now. As Yes, I mean, you feel you've what do you feel you've achieved?
Well, in cold terms, sometimes we don't think we've achieved that much. You know, in sort of, if you sort of list things and number things and work things out on paper, you start to think, well, you know, it's okay, but. And I don't mean financially, but just sort of other sort of returns, other sort of ways of judging what you've achieved. But I always think when we come, especially when we tour, and usually in our belief when we make a record, you know, we're sort of considering that sort of audience that we do have, and feeling that it's worth it to sort of slug away to do that, you know, for that period of time, and then promote the album for that period of time. So.
The fans, I mean, your real fans think that Yes is the best band in the world. There's no, you know, and I'd have to go along with that. And yet I you know, you say, well, we haven't, you know, done much. You know,
sometimes
I don't. That sounds a lot. I'm just the best band in the world, but
what? We've done something.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's more to do. That's all, you know.
I think if we could finish now, you know, we'd all have to sort of, you know, I'd have to see Chris coming in the walking stick, you know, to really believe he was sort of giving it up, you know. I mean, I believe Chris will kind of keep going for some time, I think, you know, he'd do the same thing.
Did you ever think of giving it up? I mean, did you ever think of was there ever a time when Yes was considering disbanding, or because there's always rumors about every band, you know?
Yeah, there's always rumors, and there's always periods of stress and strain and things like that. But I don't think the band as a whole has ever really thought about.
Well, because people have left, you know.
But there's always been a stronghold, you know, to sort of keep it together.
So that one person leaves, but the rest of the band.
Maybe that's, you know, that's what saved the group, is that it's been able to do that. So it's a good sort of opportunity for it to keep going, you know. Under, hopefully, not the idea of changing anymore, but maturing this sort of lineup, you know.
Incidentally, I saw that Bill's joining Genesis. Bill has joined Genesis.
Yeah.
And I just read today that Tony Kaye is playing with Bowie.
That's all right.
Right.
It's strange. And where's Peter Banks?
Don't know.
We don't know.
He might.
He'll probably turn up, you know, playing with the Beatles.
Well, one day, there'll be a Yes reunion. There'll be a Yes reunion. We'll get Rick and all the other guys. There'll be a giant Yes reunion, right?
When we were in Europe, I think we were talking about that again. It's been thrown around, but in some ways, there's particular versions of particular songs. In some ways,
yeah,
you know, the hype of them is actually that combination of people, and that's partly why we haven't played certain numbers. Slightly why we haven't attempted certain numbers. But I think we're going to cross that barrier now, you know, and do numbers any number we want to do. But there is that thing that it would be exciting to play, you know.
Yeah, I had this idea once we could kind of turn a show into a semi kind of theatrical staging of people leaving and joining, and the people that kind of came and played the numbers that were attached to them, and then they left the band.
Right.
And there was a bit of a play attached to it, and a bit of dialogue, and a few jokes
would be the
from
history of Yes with all the original cast, right?
All the original managers and all kind of the terrible,
Oh.
funny singing. That would be good.
Well, yeah, we'd play with the original amps, you know, go down to Sound City auctions or something and get the original.
And you could get ripped off too. You could get all the, you know.
Oh yeah.
Not get paid at the end of the show.
5% for nothing. Yeah.
5% for nothing. Right.
Do you keep up with the so-called rock and roll?
Occasionally, but occasionally I check into things that maybe aren't really up my street, but and then I buy records that I like. You know, sometimes I walk into HMVs and come out with 20 records, and some of them I play once, and some of them I play a lot. But